Hey everybody, it's Kyle. Welcome back to the channel. I haven't been filming very much recently. I just filmed my most disappointing of 2023 list, so hopefully that will have already been released at this point. But now I'm going to do my best of 2023 list, which I'm much more excited to bring you because I read a lot of really good books. And at the halfway point of the year, I kind of thought that this year wasn't as good. And if I look at my top list, it's not nearly as strong as last year's list, which I think was the best reading year of my life and most likely will remain that. But I did read still a lot of really good stuff, especially at the tail end of the year. Also, it's worth noting that my sleep in the first half of the year was severely affected by like random issues, so I just felt like I wasn't getting good reads in because I was tired all the time. But second half of the year, that's been solved, so we're back to business here. So I have technically a list of 15 books, but that's not true because I read 332 books this year, and it is really hard to siphon that down to just 10 or 15. So what I have is some honorable mentions that I will mention about halfway through the video, just to put a little bit of suspense in there. And I also have 5 nonfiction that I'm just going to talk about really briefly at the beginning. I know most of the viewers of the channel don't really read nonfiction, but I read a lot of nonfiction, and it feels weird to me to not include any. But it's also really hard for me to compare them to fiction reads, which I just get a very different thing out of them. So I'm going to start with the nonfiction. But before I get into that, the usual things, I'm doing one book per series, and it will just represent that series. But I'm not doing one per author. There is actually repeat authors on this list because if an author did a good enough job to get 2 separate things on the list, I think they deserve it. So, the nonfiction I'm going to go through pretty quickly. First one is Quiet by Susan Cain. This is a book about introverts and how they are kind of misaligned in the workplace and in groups of friendships and all that kind of stuff, and how we can change that and kind of just changing the perspective of that kind of stuff. I'm an ambivert, which means that I am in the middle between an introvert and an extrovert, but my wife is very introverted. I have a lot of very introverted friends, and I do think it's very helpful, even if you are an extrovert, especially if you're an extrovert, to read about these kinds of things and reconsider how the way that you interact affects people and how people have different communication styles, but that doesn't mean that they don't have value. The next one is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van de Kolk, I believe is his name. This book was just absolutely excellent. It's about trauma and how trauma, especially in childhood, affects your life and it manifests. Brilliant, brilliant book. I think everybody should read it. Switching gears entirely, it's not TV, it's HBO, is by Felix Gillette, I believe is his name. And this is a kind of history of HBO and how it became what it is. And I'm a really big HBO fanboy, and especially just like prestige TV in general. Really love this book. I just think it really just cemented how many foundational things that HBO did, and it changed the landscape of TV forever and did some of my favorite shows of all time. In a similar vein, MCU by Joanna Robinson and somebody else, I forget the co-author, is a history of the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it was surprisingly entertaining. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes drama that was just incredible in that book. I really recommend it, even if you don't love Marvel and you just kind of want to know how like movie business works and just like how corporate entities work. I think it's really good. I don't think you have to love Marvel to read this book and really enjoy it, but as a Marvel fan, I think anybody should really read it. Like it was excellent. And then finally, I have Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves. This is a book I actually read twice this year because I recommended it to my friend Bookborn, and then when she was talking about it, I wanted to kind of remember more specific things, so I reread it. So I read it twice this year. That's how much I liked it. It is about the way that society treats boys and men in our current ecosystem and how that affects them. Kind of like the trail of masculinity, how men are actually quite lonely and like have a lot of problems based on the way our culture is that is not being addressed because it feels like there's a false dichotomy between if you try and help men, that means you're not a feminist, you're not helping women, which is just not really true at all. We need to raise each other up. We all need to focus on issues from both genders. So that's my nonfiction. Again, check all of those out if they sound interesting to you. I highly recommend them all. We're going to transition into fiction books. So I'm not going to start with my honorable mentions. I'm going to start with number 15, and I'll tell you why later. So my 15th favorite book of the year was Servant of the Empire by Raymond Feist and Jenny Wirtz. Now this book here I thought was really, really good. I know in the buddy read that Alan did, some people didn't like it as much, and I understand why. There's like a romance in it that some people didn't really like. I liked what it was trying to represent. It reminded me a lot of Shogun that I really, really liked, that aspect. But other than that, I thought the political stuff in this book was really great. I thought the blend of military aspects, but also just like political aspects and personal stuff was just really, really well realized in this book. I really like Daughter of the Empire too, and I have not read Mistress of the Empire yet, but I will be reading that shortly. Yeah, I just like, the ending of this book I thought was phenomenal. It got me really emotional several times. I highly enjoyed this book, and I will be looking forward to reading more Janny Wirtz in the future, and I will probably also go back and read Magician and deal with Pug, I suppose. The 14th book on my list is Memories of Ice by Steven Erikson. Malazan is not one of my favorite experiences so far. I do really like it. I don't love it as much as some fans. I've given them all 4.5 stars, so it's not like I'm not liking the series at all. House of Chains was a bit worse for me. But Memories of Ice, while there's a whole section of this book I did not like nearly as much, the ending bit is phenomenal. There's so many great scenes in this. I had some nitpicks towards the end, but overall, I just found the last chunk of the book incredible. There's some really, really well written scenes in this. I feel like of the 4 books I've read so far, this is Erickson's best prose. I know this is some people's like favorite or near favorite of the series, and I can see why. I really liked it. I will, on the strength of this book, I will give pretty much the whole series a read because if I get another book like this, I can't complain. But I have Midnight Tides up next, and yeah, I mean, I'm liking Malazan quite a bit. Nearing Love, not one of my favorite series, but Memories of Ice was incredible. The next book I don't have a physical copy of, but that's Conspirata by Robert Harris. This is the second book in the Cicero trilogy that I buddy read over with Alan from the Library of Alexandria. I liked the second book the best. I found that the political stuff going on in it was really, really good. And I know this time period quite well, so it was more about how it was executed versus like me learning stuff about it. Whereas actually in Imperium, the first book, I knew less about that period of time in Cicero's life, but it was just dealing a little bit more like with legal stuff. It felt more like a legal thriller, and I still really liked Imperium. It was a great book. But Conspirata just kind of hit me where I wanted it to hit. I really like the portrayal of Julius Caesar in this book because it is not a portrayal that I'm used to, and I liked it a lot. Conspirata was a really, really fun book. I really recommend it. The whole trilogy, really. Dictator, I didn't like as much. But as a trilogy of historical fiction, it is one of my go-to recommendations now because I do feel like the way that Cicero is depicted is very down to earth in the sense that you root for him, but you also like you just shake your head at him and you're like, Cicero, you're just so annoying. And I think it's a really great way for people to learn more about the Roman Republic. I know a lot of people who it was their first exposure to this time period and they really liked it and found a lot to enjoy. So that's number 13 on the list. Number 12, and I honestly thought when I was going to make the video that this would be much higher. I'm actually shocked it only made 12, but that's just how good the second half of the year was. This book is by my favorite author, Brandon Sanderson. That is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Choosing between this and Tress was a toss-up. I think they're both really good. I think Yumi hit me just a little bit better. I like the aesthetic a little bit more. I like the ending a little bit more. It did not have an entire poop joke chapter, which I think is literally, I honestly think I would have put Tress on this if it didn't have that Tasha story because I hated that. I just hated that. But the rest of that book was really good. I almost chose it anyway. But I think that was like the one dock against that book. But Yumi and the Night Painter, which is the third of the Secret Projects, was very, very good. I really liked it. I want to buy the limited like Dragon Steel edition because it looks so cool. The art is gorgeous. I just had a great time with it. I really liked the mystery and all of the reveals, and I feel like the Secret Projects really allowed Brandon to just like kind of experiment with some new styles and ranges. The narration of the book was really well done by a character in the Cosmere, and just in general, I think it was really good. If you have not tried Brandon Sanderson yet, I don't think this would be my first recommendation for his books, but there are some people that I think would really like this as a first read, but I do think you could jump into it without, like, you don't need any other background knowledge and stuff. I think you could read this book totally fine, regardless of what the Sando Nuts tell you. So that's number 12 on the list. So the 11th on the list is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. Now, again, making this list was crazy because when I thought of making the list, I thought this would be like 6 or 7, and it just like kept falling down the more I went on the list. But this book is very, very good. The reason that it doesn't make it a little higher is that for the first 70% of the book, I was liking it. It's still a good book. I still thought the prose was phenomenal. I really liked the aesthetic and everything going on, but I wasn't quite gelling with it entirely. Like something was keeping me at arm's distance, and then a reveal comes in and that clicks the whole book into place, and then I think it's just an excellent, gorgeous book. The themes are just fantastic. The end is incredible. I loved so much about this book once the reveal came in, but just because it came in quite late, I I just wish we had gotten it a little bit sooner, maybe, to push it into like less of the book being like a quizzical read to me. But it's still very, very good. I'm really excited for the next book in this. Mark Lawrence, I find, has very great prose and a really good imagination. And I can't wait for the second book. I think it's The Book That Broke the World. If you're afraid of it being a grimdark book because you think Mark Lawrence is grimdark, you do not have to worry. This is not a grimdark book. It is two POVs, dueling alternative POVs of a boy and a girl growing up in a library, or like a one POV takes place in a city, and how their lives intersect. I highly recommend this. Number 10 on the list, and I was so happy that this book made the list. And it's also why I don't make this list until the very beginning of January, because I think I finished this book on December 30th. And this is Pet Sematary by Mr. Stephen King. I think this book is very, very good. I had an interesting experience with it because I watched the new movie first, and I liked the movie. I know a lot of King fans didn't like it, and I understand why now that I've read the book. But I had a different expectation of what this book was than what it is. So it was like pretty surprising to me in that way. But I also just thought it was excellent. I listened to this and read it physically in one day. Like I would read it physically, and then when I had to go do something, I would listen to the audio, and then I would come back and like immerse read it. Excellent book. In another year, it might have made it higher. I think what brought this down a little bit is, funnily enough, the fact that I read 25 Stephen King books this year. People who don't know, I vowed to finish his bibliography this year, and I ended with this one because I wanted it to be like end on a good experience. And people say that they really like Pet Sematary, and I think there were just like little things of his writing style that I had just experienced too much this year that kind of grated on me a little bit. I think if I had read this book just separately, not in a year where I read like 25 Stephen King books, this would have been higher, because this book's excellent. I have no actual issues with this book. It is a wonderful examination of grief. I read it while laying next to my rabbits, which was a weird experience because they were just sitting there looking at me, and I was like, I'm reading about dead pets. I'm glad to end the year on a high note with Stephen King after some duds and middling books at best from him. So this is number 10 on the list. The 9th book on the list is another book that came in right at the end of the year. So again, guys, make those lists beginning of January. I'm blown away when people can release it on like December 27th. I'm like, how do you know? I guess you have finished all the books you're going to read for that year or something. But my 9th book of the year is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. This book is everything it promised to be. It is very good. The story has been just stuck in my mind ever since I finished it. Some of these characters will live rent-free in my head forever. Extremely good character writing. I'm really surprised that people didn't pitch this book to me years ago, because the way that I think of this book, it is like Stephen King's town building mixed with the depravity of some of his characters, the aesthetic of A Song of Ice and Fire, because this is taking place during the anarchy of England, which is what the show House of the Dragon, that time period in the show, is based off the time period in this book. So A Song of Ice and Fire aesthetics mixed with like Bernard Cornwell's sense of pacing. Like I found like I always wanted to turn the page. The attention to historical detail and the immersion in the time period is very akin to Bernard Cornwell. And those are three of my favorite authors. So I'm really surprised that this did not get mentioned to me before as something I should like. But I loved it. I do think there is a lot of assault in this book of a sex nature. And that's something you should know going into it. There's a lot of it. There's too much. It should not be in here. Especially, like, there's one that's, like, I guess important, but I didn't like how detailed it was. But there's a lot of it that's just like, oh, and we're going to do a little assault over here. And that wasn't necessary. So that's why it doesn't get, like, a full mark rating for me, because that was just too much. But the story it's telling is wonderful, emotional, cathartic, just unbelievable. I loved all of the characters in this that you're supposed to love, and I hated the characters you're supposed to hate. I will be reading this whole series now, which I didn't think I would until I read this. I was pretty sure that I was just going to read Pillars of the Earth, and no, I'm going to have to read this entire Kingsbridge saga, at least until they start not working for me. But yeah, 9 on the list is Pillars of the Earth. The 8th book on the list, I also don't have a physical copy of, and that is Dogs of War by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Adrian is one of my favorite authors at this point, for sure. I think his imagination is wild, his range is incredible. Dogs of War might be my favorite novel by him. It follows like a bioweapon that's a dog that, like, you know, is also sentient, and you follow the dog's perspective and also some like third-person POV perspectives from other characters. And Rex is an incredible character. I loved him so much, and his story through this book is just so emotional, and I just loved it so much. It is usually my criticism, if I have a criticism of Adrian Tchaikovsky's works, is that I usually like his books a lot. I like his world. I like his plots. Everything about that. But I don't fall in love with his characters. Like, I always just like them a lot, but they don't take that extra step into being a character I love. And Rex is the first time that has been broken for me with Tchaikovsky. I love Rex, and that is what pushed this book over the other book on the list for contention for Adrian Tchaikovsky, is just how much I liked Rex. This is a fast-paced, like, techno thriller, and I don't think you can go wrong trying Tchaikovsky with this book. It's pretty short. Its pacing is incredible. I did read the sequel this year as well, Bearhead. It was still good, but not quite as good as Dogs of War for me. But yeah, absolutely impeccable. I love Tchaikovsky's work so much. And that's number 8 on the list. The 7th book on the list is Kindred by Octavia Butler. This book I also read in a day. It is harrowing and disgusting and terrible and rage-inducing, but so readable, and just I love Dana, the main character, so much. There's so much to unpack with this book. I will definitely be rereading it. I bought the book for my sister. I want my wife to read it. I want everybody to read it. I think Kindred is a remarkable work of science fiction. I don't have any drawbacks on the book. I think it just is such a dark book that it didn't quite make my top like 5 and stuff like that because of that reason. But I love this book so much as a experience that somebody should read. And the way it deals with racism and slavery and just feminism and all that kind of stuff is incredible. Highly recommend. It's also just a great story, by the way. Yeah, Kindred, Octavia Butler, good book. The 6th book on the list, I'm pretty surprised, is this high, but when I think about like memorable reading experiences, this is one of the top of my life. And I can't prioritize memorable reading experiences over just like everything else in a book, so it can't be top, but this is probably like top 5 or 10 reading experiences of my life. And this book is Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. I think it was a very, very good book, very scary. But the reason that I remember it so much is that I read 70% of the book on Halloween night after doing like a horror movie marathon with my wife. So I was in the mood. I immersed in just like horror all day. And at the time, we had just moved into our house and we didn't have blinds yet. So we have this big window in our front room where I was reading it, and it was pitch dark because we live on a really dark street, and we had no, like, everybody could just see into the house, and I could just see blackness outside. And I'm reading this book about the English countryside where these boys are being possessed by these like evil demons and forming sides, and it's incredibly creepy and tense. And my house is silent. There's this big window outside. It's Halloween. I was petrified. It is one of the scariest reading experiences I've ever had. At one point, my rabbit just moved too quickly and made a noise, and I actually literally jumped out of my seat. That's how scared I was. So, yeah, I think this book was excellent. One of the best horror books I've ever read. And I will be reading more of Philip Fracassi later on. I found his characters really good. I do think it wrapped up a bit too quickly at the end. I would have liked maybe like another 10, 15 pages or just like a little bit more at the end. But I do think it ended well. It just could have been fleshed out a little bit more. But excellent book, Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. All right, we've hit the top 5 here, and the top 5 was really hard for me to do. Now I'm going to do my honorable mentions, and the reason for that is just that some of the books that are on the honorable mentions I mentioned recently loving, so people might have thought that they were in the top 15 somewhere, but I don't think I sold them to the point where they would be in the top 5. The top 5 are books that I've been talking about all year on Discord or on streams and stuff like that, and I don't think there'd be any surprises there. So my honorable mentions this year, I have 5. The first one is Blood Meridian. Blood Meridian is a really good book. It was recommended to me by Jimmy over the Fantasy Network. I still think about Blood Meridian quite a bit. It didn't have... I think if I had read it in a vacuum, it would have been in my top 10 for sure. But I can't engage with Blood Meridian without engaging with the fact that the way people talk about it, A, irritates me, but B, set expectations. So the way people talk about Blood Meridian it's also the same way people talk about Malazan, and I just don't like it. It's just this like... This isn't everybody. There's plenty of people who like those books that don't talk this way. But there's an air from a lot of people of just like superiority because they have read the peak of literature and nobody else will ever come close. And like if you're not Blood Meridian, you might as well just pack it up. Is the but and I just that kind of thinking just bothers me. Or I can't explain it. It just turns me off from stuff. And also beyond that, just people I really appreciate their opinion on really like Blood Meridian. So I thought I would love it a lot, but I was really skeptical, and it is a very thought-provoking book. I will definitely reread it. It didn't quite hit the top 15 for me, but an excellent book nonetheless. I do think on reread I might be able to shed some of that preconceived bias and maybe appreciate the story a little bit more. The second honorable mention is Harold the Ninth. This is the most confusing book I've ever read in my entire life. It's not even close. I still don't know what happened in this book, and I read it, and then I read the sequel, and then I had a whole discussion about this book. Still don't know what happened, really. I will be rereading this when the fourth book comes out or is announced, because I don't really understand it. But the reveal that happens in the book, I think, is incredible. It's a very good book, very challenging read, but this series is one of the most unique things I've ever read, maybe the most unique thing I've ever read. And I do think it was marketed in a way that some people would never pick it up. And I just say that if you don't think this series is something for you, at least give it a try. Get past the first few chapters, because the beginning of Gideon the Ninth is almost like purposefully cringy. Like, I don't know, like it's very jarringly like cringy humor to me. But past that, you really get into the story of Gideon the Ninth, which I did really like. But Harold the Ninth, I thought, was the more impressive of the three books. Another honorable mention is City of Last Chances. I love this book. This is the other book I was going to put on the list for Tchaikovsky. The reason it doesn't quite make the list is that it took a little bit too long for me to get totally into the story. This book is almost told chapter by chapter, being a different POV. Like towards the second half, you get more alternating POVs, but for the first half of this book, it is just like new POVs almost every chapter, and you're setting up the entire ecosystem of this city and this empire that has taken over the city and tried to suppress these people and their ideas. And given the way that the citizenry all react to this problem and how they're all dealing with it, and trying to set up rebellions, and what's going to be the final spark that sets things off. I think his world building in this book is remarkable, very atmospheric, very, very good character writing. Just the fact that each person does feel different to me, and his best prose for sure. This book is incredible. I'm really, really excited for the sequel, and I will probably be rereading this not too far in the future. The next honorable mention, I'm just going to wrap these up because I've been talking about them longer than I thought I would, are The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding, which I thought was a very impressive first book in a trilogy, I think it is. The second book I didn't like as much, but The Ember Blade I thought was very fresh. Love the characters, love the story, really liked it. And then Dreams of the Dying by Nicholas Liatsu, which I was really scared going into because people said that it was like riddled with errors and stuff. I did not notice any errors. I really liked the book. I really liked the examination of depression and psychological aspects. There were some tiny aspects of the story that didn't quite work for me, but I thought it was really, really solid. I'm looking forward to the sequel of this book. Okay, so honorable mentions out of the way. We are 15 books into this top 15, and I have not told you my top 5 yet. I am crazy. So my fifth favorite book of the year is A Brightness Long Ago by Guy Gavriel Kay. I love this book. This book is incredible. I think it is his riskiest book in some cases because he takes a lot of chances that I would not have expected, or that I haven't seen in other Guy Gavriel Kay books. But this book is very, very good. What is it about? I guess it's about a woman tries to assassinate someone who is very bad, and she is successful. This is the first chapter. I think the first page she's successful. And she runs into a guy who is technically on the side of the guy who she assassinated, and he sees her do the deed, knows who she is, but she chooses not to kill him, and instead he helps her escape. That's the very setup of the book, and then from there, a lot of political and personal ramifications ensue. This is Guy Gavriel Kay's shortest book, I think, but it packs a very big emotional punch. There were multiple times near the end of the book where I was in tears. He just writes one heck of a brilliant story with beautiful, beautiful prose. The fourth book on my list, I don't have a physical copy of, but I'll definitely be buying one soon. That is Legend by David Gemmell. I was blown away by this book. This is the book that I am most surprised that I liked this much in the year. Legend, I was doing that thing where you're near the end and you don't want to finish, so you just like read a page and you just like stop for a minute and then you read another page and you stop for a minute. I love this book so much. It is so earnest, and the themes are so poignant with David Gemmell, like using it as a metaphor for his cancer and stuff. But even just the story itself, I loved it. I understand it's cheesy. It's very like, last hurrah, we're making a stand type stuff. But he has a way of cutting through the cheesiness to just hit you right in the feels and get you pumped up. Druss is an incredible character, one of my favorite characters of all time. I would go into battle beside Druss, and I would be useless in a battle, but I would want to follow him into battle. Absolutely impeccable. If I have a criticism of this book, it's that it does feel a little rough, like a first draft, or like a first book. And I do think the beginning has an insta love connection that I did not buy at all. But once the relationship is established, I did like that relationship and where it ended up going. But the first few chapters of this relationship being established, I didn't like at all. Rest of the book, excellent, loved it. I need to read more David Gemmell. Absolutely top tier. So my number one book of the year has been locked in since I read it, but the second and third was very, very tough for me. These books are very, very good, and I ended up choosing the second place one for a certain reason, but I think these books are basically interchangeable. The third book on my top 15 of 2023 is Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. This book, I can't say that I like it, but I do love it, I think is my review on Goodreads for this book. Fool's Errand is just like a perfectly I don't have a single criticism of this book. It is impeccable. Robin Hobb's writing in this book is very emotional. Some of my best favorite character writing. Nothing happens for the first half of this book, by the way, and that's totally fine. Like I think there's like 250 pages where people are just hanging out in a cabin, just talking about shit, and it's just excellent. It's just excellent. I still don't like Fitz, but unlike in Farseer, I like Fitz as the protagonist in whose eyes I'm seeing it a lot more. Like I really missed these characters. I missed Buckkeep, and I didn't know that I did. Just phenomenal, 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 phenomenal. Can't wait to finish Fool's Fate right away because I also read Golden Fool this year, and that also no notes. Love that book. Impeccable. Tawny Man is brilliant. Even before reading Fool's Fate, I know that is the case. My second favorite book of the year is a sleeper hit. If you would have asked me before I read this book in the series, I would not have expected it. My second favorite book of the year is a popular new release this year, and that is Light Space Bringer by Pierce Brown, the newest book in the Red Rising series. Love this book, and the reason I put it above Fool's Errand, I might have enjoyed Fool's Errand as a book just a smidge more. But the reason that this is higher than it is because I already knew that I loved Robin Hobb. I already knew that I loved Realm of the Elderlings, and I expected to love Fool's Errand. I really liked the Red Rising saga up until this point. I gave most of them 4.5 to 5 stars. But there's always little things about Pierce Bryan's decisions in storytelling that I don't really like. I think he values shock value more than I do in terms of like he'll interrupt the flow of a story to shock his audience because he values shocking them a little bit more than I appreciate. I would prefer him to do slightly less shocking things sometimes, but tell a more cohesive narrative with that stuff. I can't talk about what without spoilers. But that kind of stuff kept me from fully loving the series until Lightbringer. Lightbringer made me want to reread the whole series with a new eye. I think it recontextualizes everything that's happened in the series. A lot of emotional stuff happens in this book. A lot of characters having conversations that they should have had years ago. Happening in this book. After Dark Age being clearly the darkest in the series, this book is still very dark, but it has a little bit more hope, a little bit more positive events happening, although it's still quite dark. And some of the stuff that happens in the plot is incredible. Clang, 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 if you know what I'm talking about. Hype book, incredible. That is Lightbringer by Pierce Brown. And the number one book of the year, I feel like this video is too long. I'm tired of talking, but I hope I can convince you that how much I love this book. It is Lord of Emperors by Guy Gabriel Kay. This book is phenomenal. It is excellent. It is everything I want in a book. It's too good. This book is too good. This is one of my favorite books I've ever read in my life. Now, this is the second book of the Sarantine Mosaic by Guy Gabriel Kay. And I also really, really liked Sailing to Sarantium, and it just didn't make the list because it's kind of more of a setup novel. I do think they are more standalone-ish than some people say that they are. Like, I don't think it's one book split in two. I do think it is a book with a sequel, and the first book is a little bit of a more unorthodox ending place. But I do think it works as its own narrative, and then Lord of Emperors just builds off of it. But the conclusion of all the story is definitely in Lord of Emperors. And man, what a conclusion. This book made me cry like 4 or 5 times, and I feel like on reread, I would just lose my shit even earlier. What to say about this book? It is based on the Byzantine Empire with Constantine the Great, I don't know how to talk. Justinian. That's how good this book is. I just forgot history. It's so good it made me forget history. It's just excellent. There's a chariot race in this book, which is one of my favorite chapters in all of fiction. And there's a chapter where it's just 2 characters talking about injustice that has happened to one of the characters. And that's one of my favorite chapters in all fiction. This book is just so good. I've seen people read it since I read it, And every time they read it, I'm like seeing the reactions, and I'm like, how I gotta reread Lord of Emperors. I don't know what else to say. I think I said the phrase "excellent book" like 11 times, but that's all I. That's just what I think of when I think of this book. That's what comes to mind. You should read it. You should love it. You're gonna ask yourself, how can a chariot race be that good, Kyle? And I'm gonna tell you, I didn't believe it either. The chariot race was so good. I would like read a paragraph and then just be like, oh man, and then I would like stop and like reread that paragraph just to like soak in how incredible. It took me like so long to read the chariot race chapter. Unbelievable. This is my favorite book of the year. It wasn't that close, honestly. Like all the rest of the books were fantastic, but this book got by far the most emotional reaction out of me. I didn't want it to end. I this is why I read books is for the feeling that this book gave me, and I hope that you all had a book that made you feel this way this year because it is such a great feeling. All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking with me through way too many books. I'm sorry that I cannot restrain myself, but I just have a lot of books to talk about and a lot of really great ones. So thank you all for watching. If you want to drop your best of lists in the comments, I would love to hear them. I really like seeing everybody's favorites of the year. And as usual, everybody, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.